It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world feels soft and slow, like a warm blanket you don't want to leave. I was in my kitchen, sipping tea, when my daughter-in-law Jessica swept in with that dazzling smile of hers. You know, the one too perfect, like she's auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. She was holding a homemade apple pie, golden and fragrant, like something out of a magazine. "Helen," she said, her voice sweet as honey, "I baked this just for you, something special." I smiled back, trying to match her enthusiasm. At 62, I've learned to play nice, even when something feels off. Jessica had been part of our family for barely 4 months, married to my son Andrew after a whirlwind romance that felt more like a sprint. I wanted to like her, really, but there was always something about her a little too polished, a little too eager to please, like she was reading from a script titled How to Be the Perfect Daughter-in-Law. She cut me a generous slice of pie, setting it on a plate with a flourish. "Eat up while it's warm," she said, her eyes locked on mine. That's when I caught it, a sharp, bitter smell, nothing like the sweet cinnamon and apples I expected. It wasn't rancid, not exactly, but wrong, chemical, almost. My years as an insurance investigator kicked in. 30 years sniffing out fraud and lies teach you to trust your instincts when something smells off, literally. Jessica turned to grab a glass of water from the sink, her movements just a touch too deliberate, like she was giving me a moment to take that first bite. Call it paranoia, or maybe just a hunch, but I wasn't about to play along. The plates were identical, plain white. Thank goodness subtlety's never been my strong suit. I swapped them quickly, my slice for hers, heart pounding just a little. If you're listening to this, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I could use the company. Jessica came back, still smiling, and settled across from me with what was now my original slice. "Go on, Helen," she urged, her voice practically sparkling. "It's my best recipe yet." I nodded, pretending to take a bite, but watched as she dug into her slice. One forkful, then another. For a moment, everything seemed fine. Just a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law sharing pie on a Sunday. Then it happened. Her face changed at first, a slight grimace, like she'd tasted something unpleasant. She set her fork down, her smile faltering. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She nodded, but her hand went to her throat, and a flush crept up her cheeks. Not the embarrassed kind. The something's very wrong kind. I leaned back, watching her closely. That bitter smell lingered in my mind, and so did one thought, that pie wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me. And whatever was in it was starting to work. Jessica's cough started small, like she was clearing her throat, but then it grew deep, wrenching spasms that made her clutch the edge of my kitchen table. Her face was red now, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic. Real panic. I sat there, frozen, my own untouched pie sitting innocently on its plate. "Jessica, are you okay?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. That pie, the one with the bitter smell, was meant for me. And now she was paying the price. "Something's wrong," she gasped, her voice hoarse between coughs. She grabbed her glass of water, spilling half of it as she tried to drink. My son, Andrew, was in the living room, flipping through his phone like he did every Sunday since he and Jessica tied the knot 4 months ago. A whirlwind romance, they called it. 4 months of dating, married in a flash. I'd tried to be happy for them, really, but Jessica always felt rehearsed, like she was playing the part of the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law with every smile calculated to charm. "Andrew," I called, keeping my voice steady. He rushed in, his face pale as he saw Jessica doubled over, still coughing. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked, his eyes darting between us. Jessica clutched his arm, wheezing, "Hospital, please." Her distress was convincing, I'll give her that. As Andrew helped her to the car, I couldn't shake the thought that pie was meant for me, which meant my sweet daughter had just poisoned herself with her own weapon. The irony was almost delicious. At the hospital, chaos took over. Nurses rushed around, hooking Jessica up to monitors while she made these pitiful, gasping sounds. I stood by, watching, my mind racing. Andrew hovered near her, his face a mask of worrier, so it seemed, but there was something off about him, too. He wouldn't meet my eyes, kept fidgeting with his keys, like he was itching to leave. "Mom, I'm going to grab some of Jessica's things," he said, already halfway to the door. "You know, clothes, her phone charger, hospital stuff." I nodded, forcing a smile. Of course, sweetheart. So thoughtful. Thoughtful. Sure. I settled into the waiting room, surrounded by outdated magazines and the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. That's when it hit me. Jessica hadn't said a word about the pie's taste. Not one complaint about that bitter, chemical smell. If she'd noticed it, wouldn't she have mentioned it? I mean, who eats a poisoned pie and just ... keeps going? It was too strange, too deliberate. My investigator's instincts were screaming now, telling me this wasn't just a mistake. An hour later, Andrew was back, carrying a small bag of Jessica's things. He looked frazzled, but his eyes still avoided mine. Before I could ask him anything, Dr. Carter, I think, stepped out with a grim look. We found traces of a toxic substance in her bloodstream, he said, his voice low and clinical. This looks like deliberate poisoning. The word poisoning hung in the air like a storm cloud. I felt my stomach twist. Deliberate. That pie was meant for me, and now Jessica was playing the victim. Then came the real shock. From behind the curtain, Jessica's voice rang out, weak but sharp as a knife. She poisoned me, she said, pointing a trembling finger at me. Helen made me eat that pie. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Here I was, thinking I'd saved myself by swapping those slices. And now she was turning the tables, accusing me of attempted murder. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. Andrew's face went blank, like he didn't know who to believe. Mom wouldn't do that, he said, but his voice wavered, like he was trying to convince himself. That hesitation cut deeper than Jessica's accusation. My own son, doubting me. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I wanted to grab him, shake him, ask why he couldn't just trust me, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled tightly and said, Jessica, you must be confused. Let's focus on getting you better. The police showed up faster than I expected, but apparently, attempted murder gets you VIP treatment. A detective, a guy with tired eyes and a clipboard, took my statement. I told him about the pie, the bitter smell, how I'd swapped the slices out of instinct. I left out the part where I was starting to wonder if my son's loyalty was as shaky as his voice. Mrs. Carter, the detective said, if you suspected something was wrong, why didn't you just refuse the pie? Fair question. But explaining that 30 years of sniffing out scams had given me a sixth sense for danger felt ... complicated. I wasn't sure, I said, which was half. It just didn't smell right. As I left the hospital, the weight of Jessica's accusations settled on me like a cold fog. Someone had tried to poison me, and now I was the one under suspicion. Worse, my son's doubt lingered in my mind, sharp and stinging. Something told me this was just the beginning of a much uglier story. The hospital waiting room felt like a trap closing in on me. Those fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled of antiseptic and bad coffee. Jessica's accusation she poisoned me kept replaying in my head, sharp as a slap. My own daughter-in-law pointing the finger at me, and my son Andrew, standing there with that wavering look, like he wasn't sure who to trust. I'd spent 30 years as an insurance investigator, sniffing out lies and scams, but nothing prepared me for this. Betrayal from your own family cuts deeper than any case file. By the time I got home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my quiet little house. I tried to shake off the unease, but it clung to me like damp clothes. I kept thinking about Andrew's hesitation, the way he couldn't meet my eyes, my boy, the one I'd raised through scraped knees and late-night talks, doubting me. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I didn't have time to dwell. The police showed up at my door just as I was pouring myself a glass of wine to calm my nerves. Mrs. Carter, the lead detective, said Martinez. His badge read his voice, polite but cold, like he was reading from a script. We need to search your home. Routine procedure. Routine? My foot. They weren't here to check my plumbing. They were looking for evidence, and the way they moved, methodical eyes, scanning every corner, told me they expected to find it. By, arms crossed, trying to look calm while my heart pounded like a drum. 20 minutes later, they hit the jackpot. Or rather, they found what someone wanted them to find. Tucked behind a bottle of ibuprofen in my bathroom cabinet was a small vial of clear liquid, unlabeled, sinister in its simplicity. Next to it, a handwritten note with my name, Helen Carter, scrawled at the top, listing chemical names I didn't recognize but knew weren't for baking pies. The handwriting looked eerily like mine, down to the way I looped my L's. Either I'd developed a secret hobby as a mad chemist, or someone had gone to a lot of trouble to frame me. I've never seen this before, I said, my voice steady. Despite the panic bubbling inside, the officers exchanged glances, the kind that scream, "We've got our suspect." "This is highly suspicious, Mrs. Carter," Detective Martinez said, holding the vial like it was a smoking gun. "We'll need to take this for analysis." His partner muttered something about building a solid case, as if I wasn't standing 3 feet away, hearing every word. They left me with a warning to stay available and a patrol car parked outside my house, supposedly for my protection, but clearly to keep an eye on me. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the officer pretend to read a newspaper, while obviously watching my every move. That's when it sank in. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a suspect in an attempted murder case. Me, Helen Carter, the woman who spent decades putting fraudsters in their place, now on the wrong side of the law. The evidence was planted. I was sure of it. The timing was too perfect, the setup too neat. Someone had used those chaotic hours at the hospital to sneak into my home and stage this little crime scene. But who? Jessica was in the hospital, hooked to monitors, playing the perfect victim. Andrew had been there too, hadn't he? Or had he? That thought twisted in my gut like a knife. My son, my own flesh and blood, couldn't be involved. Could he? I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my phone and dialed the one person I knew would believe me. Martha, my old friend from my investigator days, picked up on the second ring. "Helen, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. Martha had been a private detective for years, the kind of woman who could spot a lie from a mile away. If anyone could help me unravel this mess, it was her. "Martha, I'm in deep trouble," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "They think I tried to poison Jessica. There's evidence in my house, planted evidence. I need your help." I spilled everything: the bitter-smelling pie, the swap, Jessica's accusation, the vial and note. Martha listened without interrupting, her silence steadying me. "Helen," she said finally, "this sounds like a setup, and a good one. I'm making some calls. Stay put for now." 20 minutes later, my phone rang again, and Martha's voice was grim. "I checked with a contact at the precinct. They're issuing an arrest warrant for you. First thing tomorrow morning. You need to get out of there now." My heart stopped. "Out? Martha, there's a cop parked right outside my house." "Go out the back," she said, calm as ever. "Come to my place. You know the address. We'll figure this out together." I stood there, phone in hand, staring at my cozy kitchen, the place where I'd raised Andrew, where we'd laughed over late-night snacks. Now it felt like a crime scene. 30 years of chasing liars had taught me one thing: sometimes you have to run to fight another day. I grabbed my purse, a few essentials, and slipped out through the back garden, moving quietly past the roses I'd spent years tending. The patrol car was still out front, oblivious. I felt like a fugitive in a bad movie, sneaking through my own backyard. I drove to a bus station 2 towns over, left my car in a lot, and started a zigzagging journey of buses and cabs to Martha's place. By the time I got there, night had fallen, and I was exhausted, but my mind was racing. I was a fugitive now, running from a crime I didn't commit. And somewhere, someone was probably congratulating themselves on a plan well executed. But they'd underestimated me. I wasn't just a mother-in-law with a knack for spotting scams. I was Helen Carter, and I wasn't going down without a fight. Martha's guest room smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a safe haven that felt worlds away from the chaos I'd left behind. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching a mug of tea she'd handed me, though my hands were still shaking from the adrenaline of my escape. I was a fugitive, now me, Helen Carter, 62 years old, a woman who'd spent her life unraveling other people's lies, now running from the law. The irony wasn't lost on me. If I wasn't so terrified, I might have laughed. Martha sat across from me, her laptop open, her face set in that determined look she always had when we worked cases together. "Helen," she said, her voice steady but kind, "whoever set you up knew exactly what they were doing. That vial, that note, it's a professional frame job. We need to figure out who and why." I nodded, though my mind was stuck on one question. Could Andrew be involved? My son, my boy. The thought felt like a splinter in my heart, sharp and impossible to ignore. "Let's start with Jessica," Martha said, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. "She's the one who baked the pie. If she's got a history, we'll find it." Martha still had contacts from her days as a private detective, cops, clerks, even a few Liston legal sources who owed her favors. While she made calls, I tried to piece together what I knew about Jessica. It wasn't much. She'd swept into Andrew's life like a summer storm, all charm and big promises. 4 months later, they were married, and she was calling me Mom, with that polished smile. I'd always thought she was playing a part, but I'd brushed it off as mother-in-law jitters. Now, I wasn't so sure. By noon, Martha had dug up enough to make my head spin. "Helen, your daughter-in-law isn't who she says she is," she said, spreading out printed pages like a dealer laying out cards. "Jessica Harper doesn't exist, but Sarah Collins from Seattle does. So does Emily Parker from Chicago." She slid 2 photos across the table. Same face, same practiced smile, same cold eyes I'd mistaken for warmth. My stomach churned. Jessica War, whatever her real name was, had a history. Sarah Collins had married a wealthy widower in Seattle, 68 years old, who died of food poisoning 6 months after their wedding. Emily Parker's husband in Chicago, 71, had a heart attack just 5 months into their marriage. The pattern was chillingly clear. "She's a black widow," I whispered, the words tasting bitter. "Marrying rich men, killing them, taking the money." Martha nodded. "And now she's after your estate, Helen. $8 million isn't pocket change." I felt a chill. My late husband had left me comfortable, but I'd never flaunted it. How did Jessica know? And more importantly, how was Andrew involved? He'd been so quick to leave the hospital, so hesitant to defend me. The splinter in my heart grew sharper. "We need more," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If Jessica's behind this, someone helped her plant that evidence. She was in the hospital, under observation." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Only one person had access to your house during that time, Helen." She didn't say his name, but we both knew. Andrew, my son, the one who'd said he was grabbing Jessica's things but had been gone just a little too long. I shook my head, not ready to face it. Andrew wouldn't do that. He's my son. But even as I said it, doubt crept in, cold and heavy. Martha didn't push, just handed me her laptop. "Let's check your security camera," she said. I'd installed one by my front door a few months ago after a neighbor's break-in. With everything that had happened, I'd completely forgotten about it. My hands trembled as I logged into the app, pulling up the footage from the day we were at the hospital. We watched in silence, the grainy video loading like a ticking bomb. And there it was. Andrew's car pulling into my driveway at the exact time he'd claimed to be at his own house. Andrew, walking to my front door, keys in hand, moving with a purpose that made my chest tighten. Andrew, inside my house for over an hour, plenty of time to plant that vial. That note, maybe even rearrange my medicine cabinet for dramatic effect. Worst of all, the footage showed him slipping out the back door, avoiding the camera like he knew it was there. Nothing screams innocence like sneaking out your mother's back door. "He lied," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like a betrayal of their own. My son, my Andrew, had lied to the police, to me. Martha put a hand on my shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "Helen, I'm sorry, but this is hard evidence." I stared at the screen, willing it to show something else, anything else. But the truth was right there, undeniable. My son had walked into my home and set me up to take the fall for attempted murder. "Why?" I croaked, my throat tight with grief. "Why would he do this?" Martha didn't answer, just squeezed my shoulder. She didn't need to say it. We both knew we had to keep digging. "Let's check his financials," she suggested. "If he's involved, there'll be a trail." We spent the next hour combing through records, thanks to a contact of Martha's who could access bank data faster than should be legal. And there it was, a series of transfers from Andrew's account to an offshore one, small but frequent, totaling thousands over the past few months. The account was linked to a name we didn't recognize, but the timing lined up with Jessica's arrival in his life. "He's been planning this," I said, the realization sinking in like a stone. My son, the boy I'd tucked in at night, the one I'd cheered through every small victory, had been plotting against me, for money, for Jessica, or maybe for something else entirely. The pain was raw, like someone had ripped open my chest and left me bleeding. But alongside it was something else in God. If Andrew thought he could frame his own mother and walk away, he'd underestimated me, badly. "We need to know more," I told Martha, my voice hard now. "Jessica's not working alone, and Andrew's not just a pawn. We're going to find out what they're hiding." Martha nodded, her eyes glinting with the same determination I felt. Someone out there was probably laughing, thinking they'd pulled off the perfect crime. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The weight of Andrew's betrayal sat heavy in my chest, like a stone I couldn't dislodge. My son, my own flesh and blood, had walked into my home and planted evidence to frame me for attempted murder. I spent a sleepless night at Martha's, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that security footage in my head. His purposeful stride, the way he slipped out the back door like a thief. But the question that kept me awake wasn't just how hit, was why? Why would Andrew turn against me? Was it Jessica's influence, or something darker inside him I'd never seen? By morning, I'd made up my mind. "Martha," I said over coffee, my voice steadier than I felt, "I'm going to their house. I need to hear it from Andrew himself." Martha's eyes widened, her mug pausing halfway to her lips. "Helen, that's a terrible idea. You're a fugitive, and we know Andrew's involved. This could be a trap." She was right, of course. Martha always was. But this wasn't about logic anymore. It was about my son. I needed to look him in the eye and ask why he thought killing his mother was a reasonable plan. "I have to," I said, grabbing my keys. "I need answers." I drove to Andrew and Jessica's house that evening, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and heartbreak. The lights were on, and voices drifted through an open window, Jessica's sharp and cold, Andrew's low and uncertain. I parked a block away and crept around to the side of the house, crouching in the shadows like some kind of suburban spy. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and hit record, propping it carefully on the windowsill. If they were going to confess, I'd make sure it was on tape. "Stop feeling guilty, Andrew." Jessica's voice cut through the night, sharp as a blade. "This is for us. $8 million. A fresh start. No more living in her shadow." I froze, my breath catching. $8 million. My estate. That's what this was about. My late husband's investments. The nest egg I'd planned to pass on someday. They wanted it now, and they were willing to kill me to get it. "I know," Andrew said, his voice shaky, like he was trying to convince himself. "But seeing Mom like this, running from the police, it feels wrong." "Wrong," I wanted to scream. "Framing your mother for murder feels wrong." But I stayed silent, my phone capturing every word. Jessica's tone turned icy. "Wrong is letting your mother control you your whole life. She's always treated you like a failure, Andrew. With me, you're finally someone who matters." Her words were like poison, dripping with manipulation, hitting every insecurity I knew Andrew carried. I'd tried to be a good mother, to push him to be his best, but had he really felt so small? My heart ached, but before I could process it, Jessica's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "And if this goes south, don't worry, I've got it covered. The police will believe it was all your idea. I've already set up the texts to prove it." I nearly dropped my phone. The twist hit me like a punch. Jessica wasn't just using Andrew, she was planning to throw him under the bus. My son, the one who'd betrayed me, was nothing but a pawn in her game, and he didn't even know it. Andrew's voice faltered. "What do you mean, my idea?" Jessica laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Oh, Andrew, you sweet, naive man. Did you really think I'd take the fall? You suggested the pie, remember? The police will see it that way." That was it, the twist that made my blood run cold. Andrew had started this, had suggested poisoning me, but Jessica was ready to pin it all on him to save herself. I couldn't believe it. My son had planned my murder, and his own wife was setting him up to rot in jail. It was almost poetic, if you had a taste for dark irony. Before I could move, Jessica's eyes locked onto my phone. "Andrew, someone's here," she hissed. I heard the scrape of a drawer, then the unmistakable click of a knife being picked up. My heart raced. Apparently, my evening wasn't dramatic enough without a weapon. "Helen, I know you're out there," Jessica called, her voice dripping with menace. "You just made this so much easier. I can claim self-defense when you come back to finish me off." I ducked below the window, my pulse hammering like I'd run a marathon. Jessica was planning to kill me right there, and call it self-defense, tying up her loose ends with a neat little bow. I grabbed my phone and bolted for the backyard, my legs moving faster than they had in years. "Come out, Helen," Jessica taunted, her voice carrying through the night like a predator's call. "You can't hide forever." Andrew's voice broke in, panicked. "Jessica, this is too much. What if someone hears us? Then we say, 'She attacked me,' Jessica snapped, her patience gone. The police already think she's a murderer. This just seals the deal. I crouched behind their garden shed, clutching my phone, still recording. Every word was gold evidence of their conspiracy. Jessica's threats, her plan to betray Andrew. I just had to survive long enough to use it. Their footsteps crunched closer, methodical, like they'd watched too many crime shows. "She's ruining everything," Jessica said, her voice cold as ice. $8 million. Andrew, think of it as your inheritance, just a little early. I held my breath, praying they'd search the other side of the yard first. My only chance was the gate at the back. I moved low, silent, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. I slipped through the gate and ran to my car, hands shaking as I started the engine. I had it all now: video of Andrew planting evidence, audio of their plot, Jessica's voice promising my death. Time to end this nightmare. Assuming I could stay alive long enough to see justice done, I drove straight to Martha's house, my hands still trembling from the chase. My phone, clutched like a lifeline, held everything. The security footage of Andrew planting evidence, the audio of him and Jessica plotting my murder, her cold promise to betray him. I'd escaped with my life, but the cost was a wound deeper than I could name. My son, my Andrew, had wanted me dead, and Jessica, she was ready to let him take the fall. It was a twisted kind of justice. Watching their plan unravel, Martha took one look at me and put on a pot of coffee. "Helen, you're a mess," she said, but her voice was warm, steadying. We sat at her kitchen table, reviewing the evidence like we were back in our investigator days. The footage, the audio, it was airtight. "This is conspiracy, attempted murder, the works," Martha said, her eyes sharp. "We're taking this to the state police. My contacts will make sure it gets heard." We drove to the state police headquarters at dawn, my heart heavy but resolute. I surrendered myself, handing over the evidence with a calm I didn't feel. "Mrs. Carter," Detective Captain Reynolds said, after listening to the recordings, "this changes everything." He studied the footage, his face grimmed. "We're issuing warrants for Andrew and Jessica immediately." I nodded, the words barely sinking in. Justice was coming, but it felt hollow. They caught Andrew that morning, still at home, looking lost without Jessica's orders. Jessica, true to form, had vanished, but she didn't get far. A tip led police to a nearby airport, where they found her with a new ID, ready to board a flight to who knows where. She'd already been researching her next target, another wealthy widower. The woman was nothing if not consistent. In court it was a spectacle of betrayal. Andrew claimed he'd started the plan, driven by years of feeling like a failure in my shadow. Jessica, he said, had pushed him to act. Jessica, cool as ice, insisted Andrew forced her into it, her tears almost convincing. But the evidence spoke louder. Jessica's past unraveled: Sarah Collins, Emily Parker, a trail of dead husbands and stolen fortunes. The jury didn't buy her act. She got life without parole. Andrew, for cooperating, got 15 years, a lighter sentence, but still a lifetime of consequences. I walked out of that courtroom free, vindicated, but broken. My son was gone, not dead but lost to me in a way that hurt just as much. I'd survived, but at what cost? Everything I'd fought for, my family, my trust, was ashes. Yet, in that pain, I found something else: strength, not the kind that comes from winning, but from letting go. I learned that healing isn't about erasing the scars, it's about carrying them with grace, finding peace in the quiet moments, like a sunrise after a long night. If you've ever faced betrayal, felt the sting of a family turned against you, share your story below. Your voice matters. For me, I'm still learning to live with the wounds, but I'm here, still standing, and sometimes that's enough.